Last week, my mother had knee surgery, so.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I emailed Mr. Johnny and let him know, so. He didn't think I was just,
Goofing off. Huh?
yeah.
I don't know who the speaker's supposed to be tomorrow.
I don't know either. But
Usually,
they sent the email out yesterday.
usually Gwen sends out a text, but I hadn't seen it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know she, like you said, she sent the email out about all the, upcoming, meetings, but, yeah. We should be good to go. David, just remember to tell me what page to go to, okay?
Okay, I think we're actually gonna start at page 72.
David, I need to ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
Article
In-
5, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Article
Yes,
5, okay,
yes,
got
mhm.
it, thank you.
Did you take the right for a farmer to not have a mobile home on the property that has employees?
Yes. I don't really think we got those kind of farms anymore, do we?
Charles Rooks,
And does he have it now?
468 acres of it.
Yeah. I mean, anything already in there would be grandfathered. But anything new,
You can still get that with a special exception if need be.
I think I took it out totally, but, if he's already got it, it wouldn't change for him.
I mean, he's had those,
I could just see that being abused.
oh, it could be.
Yeah.
Uh,
So,
Thanks, Frank.
Hello, sir.
I'll come on the other side.
Need some help? Frank, hold on, I'm coming. It will, but it's kind of difficult.
How are you?
I'm doing good, Bruce, how are you?
I'm well. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Anything new?
Oh, no, just same old thing.
I'm just saying.
Hey, you sit in here for a quick lady.
I'm doing good. Never ends, does it?
Yeah,
This little
but it's all good, all good.
Thank goodness. Glad we, I guess glad we can do it.
I know, right? You got it?
What's up?
hello.
How are you? Always a good thing. That's always a good thing.
All I got. I thought maybe we'd have little tables down there.
I
you know,
will bring
for
this
another
to you and,
Well, we could have hooked y'all some mics up and everything down there, had we known.
I didn't think about it soon enough.
Yeah, if we'd known earlier,
Oh,
we
thank
definitely
you.
could have done that.
I do have to get it back at some you point. doing okay?
Oh, let me tell you something else I have. I have the original copy.
Okay.
Triple R.
Oh, really?
I'm here.
I was a
Here's,
Mm-hmm.
I did a little light
some
reading.
real stuff on that. I had the FBI rule today.
Did you make some heads or
We
tails
had
out of what
a
you took off?
member on there who was,
Where
trying
does that go? And
to,
I tried to number the pages.
I had to,
exercise the.
and I went out on the deck and was reading,
what's the
and all of a
acronym
sudden
used
got this
to
big puff of
bribe,
wind.
Public official.
Oh, no.
and here, hey, and I
It's
I
must have
forget
very
spent
the name
windy,
2
that's for
hours
sure.
trying to
I
get
had
the
the
mess back
FBI.
together, and never did get it back together right.
Anyway, we drafted the original.
I went by and,
Your pages should be numbered, so
they're
maybe.
not,
They're
Oh.
not.
Well, the
They are
packet-
not.
My packet's numbered.
And I had.
Mine is not.
For you.
I'm surprised, I mean, I
Hey.
thought that you guys had the same packet
Book
I
is
got.
older than me.
Mine is numbered now because I numbered them, but there was no number on them.
Most of what's in there is still.
And when the wind blew a whole
Yep.
handful of mine out, I
Doesn't
had a mess.
change.
This is just.
How you
Bless
doing
your heart.
tonight,
When
there,
I
Miss
printed
Frank?
mine out, look, this morning, look,
No.
yeah,
Alright.
And this is just pages 81 through 208.
yeah, it goes to page 301.
The ones that I had, I mean, the ones we went through.
I got a most
Yeah.
procedure on
I
the
had
range
a
tomorrow.
Subdivision, they were trying to stick in up
We
in
stopped at
19,
4:15.
19,
Okay,
and
I think they said we're actually gonna start on article.
You know, that's what happens when you're,
Oh, yeah, the townhomes.
you go into Peachtree Dermatology.
So that had gone, went, then it went to
Probably
both
for
of them.
30
The guy was
years.
calling me, wanting to
Oh,
know
we were
what
in
was happening
Article
down
And
four.
my,
signs back up there again.
Richard Stern, whose dad was the one who started the firm,
Transpired that you.
retired December a
Property.
year ago.
There's,
And,
Then I have all of these others.
he said, I got this new guy
Manly
coming
Road.
in and you're gonna like him. This guy stayed
Yeah,
there.
it's
The also
hot.
ran.
anything out there for that one?
Hot, that's for
What's the
sure.
one on Manly?
Y'all saw it a few
I
months
get,
ago.
I
It
get
was
all
that
the same
multi-lot
emails you guys
commercial.
get, I know.
Today.
I went through all the exercises, this exercise at Fulton County.
He changed it, so that'll be
But
back
it
to
took
y'all
us
They saw my
2
legs.
years.
this month.
Well, I hit
I
something.
don't doubt
Get
it.
the whole thing
I don't
redone.
doubt it.
So, this is a challenge.
So I went to one of Sandwich's offices and thank God he's got a new woman, a young girl in there.
I just have a little paper. Don't you just love all this extra
I
paper?
don't think so. She said, let's do a biopsy. I said,
Yeah, crickets.
And these were the Newt's handouts, mammoth arms. I just brought everything back,
Well, you did good.
who did it for you?
even my little map.
There you go. I think I've got all mine too.
I forgot my magnifying glass, but at least I got my mallet. Now there's two.
I noticed that when I came in earlier, I don't know why there's two.
Am I
You get to
Maybe one for the
choose.
chair and one for the
You get to
co-chair.
choose
Yeah.
which one feels best.
Here, let's battle. Bruce, you,
We both
Yeah.
did that. Ooh,
Yeah.
we could. Hey, they look the same. Not just. Oh, okay. Yeah, one's got a more of a point on it, like a stabbing.
oh yeah, there's that.
With having put 6 shots in it each time.
I don't know, I'll have to call Clay and ask him if he likes the big one or the little one.
I hope I don't run out of nuts because you don't give me.
Well, I tell you what I did about 2 years ago.
There's mine. We're all here now. Yeah, we're all here.
Because my regular doctor put the
My microphone on? Are we recording?
Yes, mics are hot,
Okay.
6 o'clock.
And this was the PA.
Oh, there it is.
Let's not spot about you.
There comes our attorney.
There he is.
Some kind of infection.
Just can't get enough meetings, Skinny.
For about a week or 10 days. But you know, my doctor. Look any different than it did to begin with.
My dining room table seems big as this. So we're starting at 5, Article 5, is that what he said? page did you say?
Article 5,
Okay,
Okay,
section
probably gonna
501.
add
Right,
some,
got it.
but.
I have page 125.
At
So I
least
guess
we're
it really
off
matters.
A, A prime, A.
Yeah, I couldn't get sandwiches.
Numbers numerically, about 200.
Because they were booked up.
So
That's the
we
problem.
are not going to discuss then Article,
I got a bad
the
score.
remainder of Article 4.
But
Oh, we got kind of through that one, didn't we?
Well, I stopped at 415. I circled right there. That's where we stopped.
pretty leg for a little bit.
Maybe I,
Wow, maybe we could go back.
maybe I misunderstood myself when I got all this stuff home.
You,
Hey,
Good afternoon
How
or
you-
evening, as the case may be.
without numbered pages now, you're gonna have to tell me
Right.
where we are here.
yeah, that would help me too.
And mine's not exactly right in some area here since the wind come along and blew a whole stack of them down the floor and you can't put it back together.
I guess Steve's not gonna be here. I could overlap a little bit. Good evening. Thank you to the individuals who have joined us. I'm going to call the meeting to order now. This is a work session for the Planning Commission. We appreciate those of you who have joined us. It is for you to observe. There will not be an opportunity for community or public input. But I just wanted to thank you very much for being here.
All right,
David,
so
shall we begin?
last Tuesday's workshop, May 6th, we got through Articles 1, 2, 3, and 4. Had some good input with that. Obviously, it took a long time because there's a lot in, especially Article 4. So tonight we decided to have another one and talk about some things in Article 5, which is AR1 zoning, and then the successive residential zonings and the articles after that. So we will focus just on Article 5, starting with Article 5 tonight. For those following on the screen, there were several renditions of AR1, and I apologize for that. There's quite a few things in there to change and add, but we're going to start on that screen on page 72 of the electronic packet, as that has the most up-to-date livestock standards and all that we're proposing to use. Like I said, I do apologize for there being several renditions of AR1. Basically, it's the one with the revised livestock wording. That'll be the most up-to-date. In terms of permitted uses for AR1, probably the most major stuff is, Mr. Ballard had a concern with the local, state, and federal government building and not including public school. That was kind of, the wording was kind of ambiguous whether it needed a special exception or not, so I went ahead and clarified that a public school is a government building like anything else and does not need that special exception. However, the private schools still would. So I did make a clarification there. The next major thing, which has been,
One thing, David, by the way, folks, a government building by either the feds, the state, Spalding County, or the Board of Education is not subject to the zoning ordinance to start with. A private school would be.
right,
Why, in fact, are they not subject to that?
It's a question of hierarchy of the government, Frank. And the ability of one government to use land use as a mechanism to tell another government what to do. That's ultimately, or what not to do. That ultimately is the reason. I mean, Spalding County cannot tell the federal government where to locate a post office.
I left my copy of the Constitution at home.
Well, it's, that one's not in there.
all right, so, which brings us to the probably the most major thing in the permitted uses of AR1, which is agriculture. Like I said, we had a version of that back in, I believe it was March, and that was a starting point, but it had a lot of revisions and justifiably so, a lot of criticism from the public and things like that. So I did work to simplify it, to make it more flexible, not as arbitrary as it was. And the goal is, right now in the code, it just says the word agriculture, which is everything from raising crops to keeping livestock to major chicken houses to you name it. It has it. And that's a problem, that it's just one word like that and not any restrictions whatsoever. So we've had some problems with the smaller properties with some code violations and things. I've had some people call and ask, hey, I'm moving from such and such place, can I put, 6 horses on this 1 acre piece, things like that. So we're trying to balance it out with having some restrictions so we don't have a bunch of excess on the smaller properties, but at the same time, we have a lot of people that are with subsistence agriculture, things like that. We certainly don't want to harm that. So we're trying to strike a balance here between excess and then people's not harming their country way of life. So we, of course, on gardens and crop growing, no restrictions on any size lot. Then when we get to livestock, we have cannot have livestock and poultry in any major platted subdivision within interior streets. I think that restriction goes a lot toward what we're wanting to accomplish by not having a neighborhood with a lot of livestock and poultry in it. Now, the real thing is getting outside of the subdivisions, having some reasonable restrictions in that. I did make a distinction between large livestock and small livestock and poultry. Again, looking at people that want to, have their own eggs and milk and so on and so forth, not wanting to restrict that too much. So horses, I'm not picking on horses, but horses are not part of subsistence agriculture like that. They're a hobby. Obviously, they don't produce products. So we try to keep them separate from the rest of the livestock. The large livestock, cows, hogs, llamas, alpacas, emus, donkeys, mules, so on and so forth. We have some restrictions there on lots less than 3 acres, 3 acres and above, not limited whatsoever. I would like to bump that up a little bit, the up to 0.999 acre lots. I want to put it as a maximum of 2 of each kind allowed, so you can have a pair, possibly male, female. And then for 1.0 to 2.999, maximum of 4 of each kind allowed. So kind of give a little bit more flexibility there to large livestock. Small livestock and poultry on the next page there, not limited at all due to their small size. If you go back up to the horses for a second on the previous page, these standards for horses were already found in other zoning districts like R1 and R2. It's basically you gotta have a minimum 3 acres to have a horse, and then for each additional horse, you gotta have an additional 3 acres. Of course, if you think of a 1 acre piece of property with a house on it and other things, there's not a lot of room for a horse to run, and they need to run. So that's why there's a distinction there with horses. And then if you go to the next page, all the commercial grade, large scale chicken barns, hog farms, dairy farms whatsoever that aren't in existence now, new ones coming along that are proposed would need a special exception, and they're talked about a little bit further down with the special exceptions section. Livestock and poultry, which are present on properties prior to the adoption date of these revisions, shall not be regulated. There's going to be no counting, taking away what people already have out there. That's all grandfathered in. This is concerning new cases, and only restricting it on real small lots. So that's the balance we struck. I did get some feedback from some of the public in regards to farming activities. They said it was a great improvement over what we had originally proposed. So I think this is a decent compromise to try to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, David, if I could just, I appreciate your effort there with the, trying to have a pair and stuff. Again, but looking at that, when it talks about 3-acre lots and above, I'm still not sure when we're talking about, goats, pigs and stuff like, or excuse me, we're talking about cows, hogs, llamas and stuff like that, is not limited, not a little bit vague there. I mean, there's still guidelines out there on what's recommended on amount of, cows or pigs to have on a acreage. And I don't think we need to, if you say not limited, is that gonna, they're gonna be pushing the commercial grade, I'm afraid, in some cases.
Yeah, it's possible. I am gonna have a definition of the chicken barns, which are the large grade
Right.
chicken, and the hog farms, things of that nature, have definitions of those. But beyond that, it was just getting kind of arbitrary with 3 to 6 acres this, 6 to 9 acres this.
Yeah, no, and I wouldn't
Yeah.
wanna do that, but I think, again, there's some basic guidelines in farming techniques and stuff that,
Right.
that can be referenced to, something. Again, I don't know, you don't wanna have to be out there trying to do it, but for example, I noticed the other day when I was driving down, through South Georgia, and I came across an area, it was probably about maybe only a half-acre little fenced-in area, may have been an acre. But I mean, they had so many goats out there. I mean, it looked like a feed lot because, there was no grass, no anything. You had to put hay in there to feed it. And I don't know that we really want spots like that they can just have how many they want on a small area, even if they have 3 acres. But anyway, that was just one thought that I had. If there's some other way we could do it to kind of tie it back into standards.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Hey, but I'm on the same wavelength as Bruce on that about the goats. Because, you see tons of people who've got them out there and they basically are doing nothing but just clearing, trying to clean up the weeds and everything up like that.
What are you talking about?
And once that happens, unless they move them on, and let me backtrack just a minute on the livestock. Would that, and I'm not trying to be funny, would this include giraffes?
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 No, that would be considered an exotic animal, which we need to define.
Yeah, I've seen giraffes on that road down there back behind where the plantation pipeline depot is, north of Barnesville.
North of where?
Milner,
Maybe I'm on the wrong page.
Oh, yeah.
honest to God, a giraffe in the backyard there.
No, that would be considered an exotic animal.
Okay, all right, thank you. Are exotic animals addressed anywhere here?
I can provide a definition of them.
Might not be a bad idea.
Sooner or later, somebody's gonna want a tiger in Spalding County. But the fact that it's not listed in the livestock things we have here means it would not be allowed.
Okay, thank you.
That,
And see, when it gets to sheep.
Sorry, we have just a little, David's page and my pages aren't lined up. We're trying to determine which one. The one in the past that had the breakout with the goats and sheep and all, that was the older version,
Yes,
right?
that's no longer being considered.
You guys can share.
All right, let's make sure which.
Yeah.
There's the livestock.
Yeah, that was,
Yeah, so this is what it says now. And so see, under large livestock, cows, hogs, llamas, that, and then 3 acres lots and above, not limited.
See, mine don't say that.
Well, that's the old version that you're going off of, I'm not sure.
Right.
Maybe that one over there should have it, the one that you had got last week at
yes.
the meeting. I think you got the old.
Well, that's the same thing that's on this.
Mhm.
And it's, you know, on the screen too.
What we're reading off of the screen is what you're referring to as the electronic.
Yes,
And that's something new from the tune, that half of which I'm holding up.
it
the
should have
other
been
half
in
of
there
which
from,
is here.
it should have been in there from last week if
Yeah,
we
we-
got to that point.
That was the electronic was from last week?
Yes.
They are the same. So I am an unnumbered stack of piece of paper trying to find where you are, and I'm totally lost.
Article 5.
Okay, you're on the old one too.
Article 5,
You're on the old version.
and
Yeah, I had, it's not gonna be this way with
in
it.
Article 5.
It's not gonna be this way with the other districts, but there was a couple renditions of AR1, which makes it,
That's the old one.
apologize for that.
Well, AR1's gonna have agriculture.
Okay,
That's gonna-
I got it in front of me, but this is what I've been toiling over for.
Yes, the one, Bruce is referring to is null and void, as far as the sheep, the goats, the
Right.
this acre, this acre, this acre.
Okay.
Okay.
Mine is no
Yes.
longer.
That's null and void.
It's the same one that I'm looking at right now.
Yeah, well, it's.
Can you scroll down on the
Erica,
article?
could you cursor up, please, ma'am?
Up.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Oh,
how
okay.
far?
Hold on.
Sorry.
And why did I?
So is there a consensus of the board that these standards are more flexible, a lot less arbitrary, more common sense than the last rendition, but it's just a question of, as Bruce was saying about the 3 acres and above. Is that certain animals you're worried about?
Is what?
Is that certain animals you're worried about?
No.
3 acres and
No,
above?
I just didn't wanna leave it quite so open that, because like I say, I know some of these people have a tendency to wanna go to the max if they have an opportunity, and I just thought if it was something we could tie back to, like I say, kinda standard farming practices or some reference to that,
Right.
then that,
Erica,
It may not
go
be.
back up just a little more, please, ma'am. Okay. So David, 6 on the screen is a permitted use in AR1.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So, all right. Let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Okay.
All right. All right.
Use your mic.
Use the microphone? Okay. So let me play devil's advocate, and I don't mean this to be critical of the work you've done, but just for consistency and to raise questions about it. All right. So a person who has a piece of property in a platted subdivision cannot keep livestock or poultry of any kind. What if that platted subdivision, because we don't make a distinction, we say major platted subdivision as opposed to a minor platted subdivision, which is the text we've had. What if that subdivision meets the definition of a minor subdivision, but the lots are 20 acres in size, like Alan Mobley did on Cheatham Road?
So that's why I put on there with interior streets, your typical subdivision with the,
All right.
you know, I know what you're trying,
And-
technically, everything in the county is a subdivision. That's why I was trying to get away from that.
So it would have to be a subdivision with a street in AR1, so the likelihood of somebody cutting a road and paving a road to county standards to do 3-acre lots in a subdivision is probably unlikely.
True, but there is quite a few surprisingly existing AR1 subdivisions out there
With
that,
a platted street?
yes,
Okay.
that I want to, that's why I was addressing it here with that, because I don't want that to start if it hadn't already with agriculture.
Okay.
So that's what I was trying to protect.
All right. But if I am in a platted subdivision with an interior street, I get to have essentially 2 horses.
If you're what now? I'm sorry.
If I am in a platted subdivision with a street, I can have 1 horse on a minimum of 3 acres and 1 additional horse for each additional 3 acres with accessory structures. So effectively, but I also heard you say you could have a male and female, or you could, so they wouldn't be alone, you could have 2.
So any subdivisions with the interior public streets, the agriculture is out, the livestock's out.
Well, but you've got,
or B1.
you've got B, little 2I,
Yeah.
1. That's where I'm talking about.
Right.
So you are giving them a horse for 3 acres.
No, on the ones outside of the platted subdivisions with interior streets. Did I word it not right?
Well, all right, hold on.
One says it's little I says it's prohibited if it's in a major platted subdivision.
Right, with interior streets.
So outside of a major platted subdivision,
Right. You can have this number of things.
all right. So do we have examples? You said that it would be, we would be surprised at the number of subdivisions that had platted or didn't have platted streets in AR1.
Well, there's like normal, like we think of neighborhood subdivisions with interior streets that are actually zone AR1. Nothing comes to mind right now, but I've seen them, quite a few all over this map.
Okay. So those would, all right, those would likely be lots that predate the 3 acre minimum requirement?
Yes, but
Are they under 3 acres as a general rule?
probably most of them, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they've already got it, But what I don't want is for it to start spreading in those AR1 subdivisions.
Okay. All right, let's get out of the subdivisions for a second. And
Okay.
I told y'all I would look and pull up. I didn't find anything that I felt like that was, excuse me, easily applicable looking at definitions from APA on urban agriculture. And as I said last week, though I hated to give Doug Courier credit in Upson County, they define and do let's move the subdivision issue out. All right, they separately define commercial poultry and swine operations, and actually do a separate article, which we would call an appendix, to include and define standards for commercial poultry and swine operations.
Right.
Now, I don't know why they would have left out dairy, a commercial dairy, because dairy can be pretty dirty.
Right.
But nonetheless, what they have done, and according to best I can tell, these changes were made, hang on. It's interesting, they copied us on the special exception medical hardship stuff. Trying to find, I believe those were added in 2019. So they have restricted commercial poultry or swine operation.
So I have done that as
in
well.
all. Have we done, I was gonna
I
ask.
have
we
in the
done
special
that?
exception now, commercial grade chicken barns, commercial hog farms, and mid to large scale commercial dairy farms in the special exception part.
All right, so basically, anything other than crop growing or commercial horse raising, horse breeding, is going to require special exception for do we delineate what constitutes a commercial operation?
No, but I can define it.
Okay. Let me see how they define it. They have specific setbacks and minimum acreage.
Yeah, I can put on here as defined and put like you said, the minimum acreage, things like that.
Okay.
Because what I don't want is if you're selling eggs, that means you're a commercial chicken farm. No, it's not. It needs to be something very intense, large scale, meeting that acreage and things like that. It's not the average person, obviously.
Okay, let me see if they do a definition of commercial poultry. Hang on. Commercial poultry or swine operation is defined as poultry or swine facilities, horses, barns, structures, and uses owned by any individual, group, or company used to grow, feed, raise, and/or sell poultry or swine and poultry or swine products and byproducts as part of a business operation, as contrasted with raising or owning poultry or swine as a hobby or solely for owner use and consumption. Such commercial poultry and swine operation business owners may be contract growers who invest in and build poultry houses, swine barn operations, working under contract with a poultry or swine production and processing company to raise, feed, grow, and care for poultry or swine for the commercial market.
I think that word contract is critical, and I'm gonna put that in the definition. You know, my uncle had a dairy farm. He contracted with Cadets Milk out of Columbus that got the milk. If you're doing a chicken barn, you're contracting with Tyson or Purdue or whatever to get the chickens, you know, so on and so forth. So I think that's the key there in that definition to separate you from the person on a roadside stand selling some eggs.
So subject only to the addition of definitions, are we comfortable that a true large commercial swine, chicken, or dairy operation is going to be covered as a special exception irrespective of its location in AR1? Correct?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that brings us down to where we are in an area that's got smaller lots and is deemed to be a subdivision. Okay. And
Are you talking about like
I'm still in AR1.
okay, 3 or 4 lots on a main road? It doesn't have its own streets and
Correct.
things?
5 acres, 3 to 5 acres, or 3 above 3 because you got to have a minimum. Of
Those
3 to
would
be in
not be
AR1.
restricted as far as the everything but horses there. Yes.
Okay. But if
Just as a
somebody,
matter of distinction, I'm sorry, I'm a little wandering over here. So this is not a common would be on a major road or on a defined road, not subsequently subdivided with its own platted street. You're
correct.
saying just, if I have 5 acres here and 3 acres there and 7 acres there, all 3 of us could have,
Correct. That
An
would not be
open-
restricted.
we would have.
Because technically, every time you make 2 lots out of 1 lot, it's a subdivision, technically.
Correct.
That's not really what I'm talking about, the classic subdivision with the interior streets and
Little less.
everybody's house is just so and all that. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Thank you.
All right, let me ask you this. Could we, given what you said, and I agree with you, could we get by with identifying this on the basis of acreage rather than tying it in to questions about whether it's part of a subdivision?
I kind of did both.
All right? All right, walk through it with me.
So, you know, the classic subdivision realm, I don't want it to be I'm trying to make it to where it's not so, we have to split hairs and stuff. If it's a subdivision like that, like we know of a classic subdivision, if somebody calls me up, says, hey, I'm in blah, 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 it's zone AR1, can I have so-and-so? The answer would be no, because you don't need it in those subdivisions like that. So getting out of that for a second and going into the ones you're talking about, like on, I don't know, Blanton Mill Road, 4 houses side by side by side, you could, you know, anything above 3 acres is not limited, except for, of course, the horses, which are more of a hobby than farming per se. So this tries to simplify it as much as possible and trying to keep it out of the the true problem areas, a subdivision. And nobody wants to, in my subdivision, I don't wanna wake up one morning and see somebody's got a horse just cause it's AR1 in their acre and a half in the subdivision, things like that. On the other hand, there's plenty of people out on main roads in the country that want the livestock and by all means have it as long as you got 3 or more.
All right, let's look at, are y'all familiar with Kendalltown
Yep.
and South Road out there? Okay, this is the western part of the county towards Zetella
Yes,
on North Rover Road, running from, Rover Zetella Road up to Highway 16. All right, let's use that as an example.
Okay.
There, you have a number of lots that are an acre.
yes. And there's
And
only
you've got
AR1,
variance requests coming in for these.
right.
All right, those lots are an acre because they predate anything. They've been platted for 50 years or more. All right, they are zoned AR. All right. Erica, is it possible for you to go to Q Public and pull some of those up
I can do my best, yes, sir.
and let them see what we're talking about?
That's why we let the lady, replace the, mobile home
That
that
was
was
done in
damaged
tornado.
by the tornado.
And right now, David has 4 different requests for variances because those are existing lots of record which have development rights attached to them. They're all zone AR1, but they are 1 acre lots. There's no way those lots can comply with the setbacks.
River Road,
Look at, let me give you an address. 15 South Road. And see if you can put that up on the screen. By the way, this should be the only district where we have this agriculture issue.
Yes.
Okay, back it out a little bit.
Zoom out.
Zoom out, look at the,
sorry.
that's all right. Go over to the left and hit the, minus sign. Okay, all right. This is Kendalltown, and this is South Road, and this is one of the lots on which David has been, asked to review for purposes of variances on front, side, and rear yards. All right, now, this is zoned. Can you click the zoning overlay for me, please, ma'am?
But wouldn't that be considered a major subdivision with interior roads?
Yes,
Okay.
I would consider it that.
That's where we're going with this,
Yes,
okay.
yes,
All right, now this is zoned AR.
yes.
All right, so it's zoned AR1. Now, I was just about to ask, how does this fit in the stuff that you've drafted? Could these people come in and do agriculture? So the guy puts a trailer on, or a house, 1,200 or 1,500 square foot house on this lot. It is, what's the size of it?
Half an acre.
Half an acre. Half an acre. All right?
So I would say these roads are their only reason for these roads to be in existence is to serve these residential lots. Therefore, I think they're interior roads to a subdivision, Kendall Drive subdivision, whatever it's called. And
I don't think it's called anything. It's referred to generically as Kendalltown.
the small acreage notwithstanding, the fact that they are in a major platted subdivision with these interior streets would mean you could have all the garden crop growing you wanted, but no livestock.
All right? So you can have a garden.
All day long.
You
What about
can't-
3 chickens?
You can't have, because you are under or 0 to 0.99 acres, you get, I mean, you fall under A, so you get 0 for anything other than a garden.
Right.
Okay,
Because you're in that subdivision.
okay. Erica, cursor to the, east, please, ma'am. I guess you move the cursor to the west. I wanna pull in North Rover, I think that's North Rover Road. The other way, do you know how to slide the cursor on there just to move it to the west? No, I want the whole screen to move for us, okay?
So as you're doing that, again, that goes back to the one thing that I did mention last time, and we were just, had talked about that a few minutes ago, you know, again, with today's egg prices and everything else, you got all these people who want egg, and in the city of Griffin, if you have a quarter of an acre, you can have 3 chickens, you know, so, you know, to say somebody out in AR can't have a few chickens to raise an egg, to me would raise an ire, but, you know, maybe we don't have an issue with that.
Specific address or just Rover Road?
Just give me to North Rover Road.
North Rover? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, can you just?
They can't have a rooster, no, don't need a rooster.
Can't have chickens either, cause of
They
these.
can have eggs.
Well, and see,
Yeah,
we
they
need to
eat
be
this,
able
can't be
to
making
answer
I
the
believe
question
there's
when they
very
say,
small-
why not?
Yeah.
We need to be able to give them something that sounds other than just bullshit.
It's supposed to be so fun.
Agricultural livestock, I feel like a duck out of its
You know what they would say? They say, fuck you, I'm gonna have
All my
chickens
staff.
anyway.
All right. That is Rover Road, just Rover Road. Okay. All right, guys, Eric, I'm showing Erica a lot. Now, I want you
A lot
to
of
click
what?
on, this is on Rover Road. Any of these. All right?
But
All
we're
right,
not
this
seeing.
is,
Put it on that screen too, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
all right, sweet. Now, look at that lot there. Now, that is on.
1.05.
That's on Malloy Road. It is zoned AR. It is 1.05 acres. It is not in a subdivision that has a platted street.
Correct.
All right, David, walk through what they can do.
All right, so the first stipulation of being that platted subdivision, like you said, is out. So now we go down to the, she could not have horses because she did not have a minimum 3 acres there. As far as large livestock, she could have a maximum of 4 of each kind. Now that we've changed it, of cows, hogs, llamas, alpacas, emus, donkeys. And as far as small livestock poultry, there is not a limit.
Now, it is clear that that property was subdivided.
Correct.
All right.
But it's not my definition of a classic subdivision.
It's not capitalized subdivision,
All
yes.
right, now, let's go over here to Rover Road.
I mean, technically, all of Spalding County is one big subdivision.
Right.
So,
All right, let's look at this lot.
Yep.
This is on North Rover. It is not part of a subdivision with a platted road. It has 17.38 acres. What can they do?
have at it. Which is what they can do right now.
Which is, so they could come in and request a special exception if they chose to attempt to put a commercial chicken operation.
Correct.
there, if they chose.
Yes,
And if it passed through the necessary review and hierarchy.
correct.
Alright, so in that area, you've got all 3 scenarios of property that David is looking at.
Yeah.
So, they can have as many horses as they want. They can have as many cows as they want. Alright. And assuming we have, let's assume we add dairy to commercial chicken and swine, they could in fact come in and request a special exception for that. Alright, let's cursor down one more.
All right, when you're cursing, let me point out kind of what I was talking about, because again, going back and looking at some of the general guidelines and recommended standards for such critters, you know, they say a horse, you should only have 1 to 2 acres per horse. And beef cattle and dairy cattle, 1 to 2 acres per cow. So, you know, again, if we start putting 4 cows on 1 acre, you know, just over 1 acre, then we're kind of going against the basic standards of what's recommended for those. And then goats again, like them, 6 to 8 per acre. Sheep, 6 to 10 per acre. Pigs, you can go all out for Frank's favor, you can have 12 to 14 per acre.
Is that like USDA standards, or what is that?
Yeah, just pulling off standard, this one, it just says general guidelines, but they do have certain, ones out there. I can pull up what it is, but, so that's why I was just wondering if we could kind of tie something into a standard where they couldn't just have unlimited, because really on a tract of 17 acres, they really shouldn't have more than 34 cows out there.
True.
2 per acre.
Of course, those are suggestions, not binding anything.
Right.
So let me get back to that is all very valid, but getting back to my real purpose with this is to really focus in on not having nuisances and classic subdivisions, not having nuisances or too much excess on the really small properties. That's my only desire, intent here is to do that.
Okay, look at this one, David, it's 4.96 acres, 5 acres,
Okay.
AR, no platted subdivision, no road.
Okay.
This would be, he could get a horse,
One horse.
2 horses,
One horse.
just 1 horse?
Yeah,
One horse.
3 acres, it'd be
Oh,
second
okay.
horse, 3
Three.
acres.
You know, one horse town.
3 acres per horse?
Keep in mind too, that we don't have the resources, this is why I'm making this very simple and going just with the teeny tiny properties and the subdivisions and leaving everything else alone. We don't have manpower to go out and count.
that's another thing I was gonna,
So this is why,
we don't
Wow.
have an accounting police.
right, and so it may seem like having added on some of those properties you mentioned raises alarms, but at the same time, we're not gonna count on those kind of properties. We're just focused in on, you got a real problem in a subdivision, or you got a real problem on a small piece of property. That's the only things I wanna focus on.
Yeah, but before we go forward, and maybe it's not the right time to bring it up, but when we tell somebody, even if they're in a platted 3 or 5 acre subdivision, they can't have a chicken, how are we gonna sit up here in front of people and tell them they can't have a chicken on 5 acres?
Yeah.
If they want a couple chickens for it?
One thing I wanted y'all to find, for us to find lots that you could look at and have
Yeah.
David walk through exactly what that person could have.
Right.
So that you could see how this would apply
Right.
as he's confronted with somebody coming in and making the request. Now, this is not gonna be subject to a permit. They're not gonna
No.
come in and have to get a permit to have a cow.
No.
So how is this going to come up and be challenged? Who's going to challenge it? The next door neighbor who doesn't wanna hear the rooster or is tired of smelling cows.
What you're saying is the neighbor's gonna have a cow if they have chickens in there.
Could, yes, they could, Frank, yes. They could.
I would just hate for there's probably some nice AR1 subdivisions, I probably shouldn't say that, but anyway, nice ones that aren't Kindlewood or Drive or whatever
Well,
it's called.
Well, Rover Road is a decent development,
Yeah.
North Rover's a decent development.
I would
I'm sorry,
hate
my
for
lord.
that to, with just the current word agriculture in the code, for them to be able to, in a nice subdivision, AR1, all of a sudden you wake up, there's 4 cows out there and there's nothing you can do about it.
On a half-acre lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a matter of right.
I also, like I said, had a scenario where somebody wanted to put in the commercial grade chicken houses on 7 acres somewhere. And thank God they changed their mind. There is nothing I could do about that. They could put 5 of those out there and there is nothing I could do about it.
Well, Pike County's had several cases, I don't know whether you were
No, I know.
down there at that time. And people were stunned that they could have a commercial chicken house in an AR zone. Well, okay. It's agriculture, okay? It's animal husbandry, it's
That's the number-
livestock.
That's the number one agricultural crop in Georgia is chickens.
Also a major natural gas user. Well, it is. They use it to warm and keep the chickens warm and cool in the summer. Warm in the winter and cooler in the summer. So I'm through with show and tell. Y'all have,
It was good.
y'all have to decide.
That's a good way of walking it through it.
Yeah.
Cause that was, your scenarios were exactly what I was thinking of along when I was creating this. What if this, what if this, what if this?
Kendalltown should ultimately be rezoned.
Yeah.
Ultimately. And if a new zoning map were to be adopted, but of course, they're not gonna come in and request it, and the county, the Board of Commissioners is not going to put that on the record. It might be if we do a brand-new map with this, that zoning class could go on that subdivision. But you also have concerns then that folks coming on the lower side of Malloy Road where that comes in don't want them rezoned because it puts something else on the map next to them, which they think could then intrude on their AR. So,
You know, the nice thing about Kendalltown is that when it was platted, I mean, it really was the only place that people of color could
correct. There's one of the few.
buy land and put a house.
That's correct. And it's been there since before World War II.
50, oh yeah, 50, 60 years.
Now, y'all have to decide on the basis of David's text, looking at those scenarios, are y'all comfortable with those delineations? And like I say, this is gonna be enforced not by somebody coming to change zoning to go back to AR, which David's encountered several recently. But it's gonna be enforced on as we do all code enforcement, on a complaint-made basis by a neighbor who doesn't want it next to them. And one of the things that the Upson County ordinance has in terms of the criteria is a mechanism for dealing with nuisance claims.
And this is all in recognition of, we have a large country life out here. That's a good thing. It's just certain areas it doesn't need to be, so. You got a allowed rooster on 5 acres, that's just life in the
I didn't
country.
say roosters, I said chickens.
Yeah.
I love to say
Well, I got a rooster next to my office, like I've told y'all before. I'll be on a conference Zoom call and somebody will hear the rooster.
What's the rooster's name?
I have no idea, it's just roaming the neighborhood, Frank, as best I can tell, it's roaming the neighborhood.
All right, well,
He's not on the first name basis.
I mean, we seem to be getting kind of bogged down there a little bit, and I
Yeah.
understand we want to keep moving. I mean, there's a lot of good things we can still go through here. We can kind of work on a few of those little details and recommendations.
And let me go ahead and say Articles 1 through 4 that we talked about last week are going to be before y'all on the 27th in this same room. There's no way in the world this and the rest are gonna be, it's gonna be at least June, so
Okay, that's
it's
good.
just too much to handle, so.
You may say the same room, you mean the welcome in the senior center?
No,
Oh, here.
this room.
Okay,
You'll have your real meeting in this room on
All
the
right.
27th.
thank you.
So, but you'll have the finalized Articles 1, 2, 3, and 4 for that meeting, but not this plus the rest of the residentials. There's just too much work.
I agree.
So go ahead, if that influences you in any way, and just go ahead and think that, because you're not gonna have Articles 5 through 11 on May 27th.
I think that helps.
In agriculture, are people allowed to grow cannabis?
I don't distinguish the brands of crops they grow. sound like you're interested.
No, but we turned down some folks in the last 6 months that were trying to do agriculture, and that's the only kind of agriculture they ever did.
Okay.
They probably wouldn't mind if they lived next door to someone who had one cow, one hog, one llama, one alpaca,
Right.
one donkey.
Anything else in here beyond agriculture, in the special exception section that y'all stood out to you?
Let me ask you this, how does the agricultural stuff that we're doing overlap with CUVA?
It shouldn't affect it because Cuba is at least 10 acres or 12 acres minimum, so it shouldn't affect that at all.
Okay.
And Frank, there's specific uses that qualify for CUPA.
I know it, and if you look at all of the tracts in Spalding County to which CUVA has been granted, just as a matter of applied for it, that's one of your tax revenue problems we got right now.
Right now, 30% of Spalding County is under CULA.
50%, right?
It's probably more than that in Upson.
I don't see 30% of farming in Spalding County.
No, you don't.
We're way off track now.
And I
On daycare centers, you don't have to turn there, but on daycare centers, there's a whole lot more involved with daycare centers than what's in our code, in my experience in Jonesboro, so I put those safety guidelines in for that. That's, of course, always been a special exception, as it should be. Bed and breakfast, greatly expanded the requirements there for a bed and breakfast.
David, I have a question. Going back with how you've done the others, daycare center has a definition. If these criteria apply to all daycare everywhere, should they be moved to the definition and then just let this more open?
No, I tried to just define stuff in the definition section and leave the standards to, because what was happening was you have a special exception case, if you're not looking through the entire code and you miss the definition section, there's been a lot of standards that have been missed. So I go ahead and put it there in the standard section so it's something's not missed.
And this deals with,
Yeah, like,
licensing,
yes.
current state federal.
And then you gotta have a certain playground size, things of that. And this is not like in-home daycare, this is a daycare center facility.
All right, and Bruce, on 3, which is schools,
Yes, sir.
okay,
going to
I would
private.
hope that the Board of Education for a public school would come in and generally comply with those as the IDA has. But again, it wouldn't be applicable, we could not legally apply it except to a private school.
Right. That's why I changed that to private there.
Yes, sir. That was my understanding. I knew there'd been a couple of court cases about this, so that's why I was pointing that out to David when it first came up, that
Right.
we were gonna designate a school as something different.
Bed and breakfast changed, greatly expanded the standards there that you gotta have for guests. The religious campground that we had one recently, which we approved, and it was good. We had some standards for it, but right now in the code, it just says religious campground. There is no standards whatsoever except what you might apply case by case. So this gives some definite base standards to go off of for that, in case you have that again in the future.
David, you kinda zipped by me there, but
Okay, go ahead.
I did have one question on number 8, on the kennel of a commercial nature.
Yes.
And so the item C there that talks about must have 500 foot of road frontage. What was the rationale there? I mean,
Well, if you look at A, already had the standard where structures must be set back at least 200 feet. So if you have a typical 200-foot wide lot, you couldn't put any structures based on the 200-foot setback. So you're gonna have to have a lot wide enough to accommodate, the 200-foot setback.
Okay, well, I guess I was just referring and thinking about, when we were looking at those lots a while ago on there, there was a lot that was kind of like what we normally call a flag lot, but it actually had a narrow, right-of-way, lot frontage, but then it went back and it spread out. It was probably about a, 50-acre lot back in there, 50 or 60 acres. So in some cases, I've seen some areas like that, that might be a good place for a kennel because it's a way back away from everything.
I could just put lot width there and strike
It just
out the
seemed to,
frontage.
yeah, look, I understand, I like all the setbacks and everything, but I just didn't know where that
Bruce,
large
why
lot
would we not just let them apply for a variance in that case?
Well, that's fine if that's, okay, I don't have a problem with that, if they can do that, yeah, that'd be fine.
I would rather see David have the greater road frontage width.
Okay, I'm good with that, as long as that's the case, I'll just,
And
just
the
have a little note here
remedy
about
would
that.
be, obviously, if it's a flag lot that they didn't create,
Right,
then they would be able to argue that they're constrained with what they can do.
okay,
Now, notice that we do not allow a kennel as a home occupation. So
Yes.
these are standalone businesses, have to be standalone businesses in AR one.
okay. Do we have a limitation on that? I mean, like, if I had my old bird dogs out of my AR and I wanted to have 10 runs, I could have 10 runs there if I was
If you're not
personally?
doing a commercial kennel, you can have as many dogs as you want,
Right.
subject
Okay.
to nuisance restriction.
Kennel would be you bringing in other people's animals to board.
I got you.
Or breed and sell.
Okay. All right. One more bird dogs get messed up.
All right, so I was bread and I cannot talk tonight, bed and breakfast, and then the religious campgrounds. We had some requests at the very back for deer coolers, which aren't mentioned at all in the code, so I did some standards for possibly having a deer cooler out in the country.
I'll tell you, there's a dearth of them in Spalding County, and you have to go to
Yes.
like Monroe County.
It's
or
become a
somewhere
real
like
problem out here.
There used to be one down there.
Likewise, a taxidermy business, some standards for that. We have that out in the country sometimes. So now we get to the other big controversial item, and that's the possibility of a public outdoor shooting range.
Oh, yeah.
We all know Bill
Mr. Bill
Bryant's
doesn't like.
feelings on it. He has some strongly worded emails, and that's fine. Keep in mind, just like this RV resort campground, things of this nature, with all these zoning districts at the very end, it says anything not mentioned here is not allowed. So you don't have to open Pandora's box if you don't want to. You could not have it mentioned and it would not be allowed. Then there's the other thinking of, well, suppose we have these proposals in the future, should we have some standards to address them? So there's two lines of thought there. Each one is perfectly valid. If we're gonna keep this in there, it have quite a few standards. I've had some input on those standards, which is why I gave you this afternoon, late breaking, hot off the presses. Some tweaking of that, to be more in line with, I guess, modern standards for this. I understand the NRA part of it is not necessarily law, it's suggestions. There's some other standards to go by as well. So try to tweak those somewhat and add some more teeth to some of it as well. But I realize this is probably gonna be controversial, so,
Well, another thing to remember is these are commercial operations.
yes.
You can go out on your property,
Yes.
just like you can have as many dogs as you want, as long as they're not commercial enterprise. You can go shoot as many guns as often as you want, subject to constraint by nuisance actions from irate neighbors.
And that's why I was careful to put the word public in here, and I'm gonna define it as
Right.
non-family members, whoever coming to shoot at your property kind of thing.
David, since I was, chair of this August board, when, PRRD, which was the forerunner for Cherokee Rose, was, drawn up, would you be interested in letting us see how it started and then see where it is right now? And, understand why there's a difference between what it was intended for and what it has morphed into.
Right, cause PRRD zoning mentions shooting clays only, like,
That's correct.
and I seriously doubt they'd only shoot clays out there.
But there are also some restrictions on there, because I have the original copy,
Right.
both of Cherokee Rose and for PRRD, that dealt with the activities that would be allowed and their impact on the neighbors. I'm just saying, I don't think that's what it is now. I think it got changed. Wasn't changed on my watch.
Of course, you know, Sun City wasn't out there at the time, so.
Right, that's, 12 years before Sun City's ever thought of it. 'Cause that was approved around 1990, wasn't it, Frank?
I'll be glad to let you, I'll bring those in and let you peruse them, and if you want to do something with them, fine.
David, what is the difference, and do we have different definitions for shooting preserve versus public shooting range?
So, I guess I need to define those, but my idea for the shooting preserve was pretty much a hunting ground. A place where you could go and, I got some nice deer on the property, come pay a fee and hunt. In essence, what it is.
Like
Shooting
if I've got 20,000 acres in the area of southwest Georgia,
Yes,
like Robert Woodruff had at Itchaway.
yes,
All right, the only thing he did on it was let people hunt quail.
Yeah.
All right, and it had all sorts of political implications about who was there and who was invited at what time,
right.
but, and also who owned it.
So that would be, preserve is to me, hunting, shooting range is target practice, training, which I will define
Okay.
better.
Now, let me ask you this on, just a policy question on getting these. All right, I'm assuming that we will see some type of application for the property, on West Ellis prior to the time this is done and ready to the commission, likely.
Possibly, yeah.
Should this be, for purposes right now, should this be separated out so we can go to the commissioners separately because of the attention that it's going to get?
Well, technically, without this being in the code and even mentioned in the code right now, they couldn't apply.
That's correct, that's what I'm saying, they would have to have a text amendment like Ms. Pierce did.
Correct,
Going up at the same, essentially.
right.
I would have thought that Ms. Pierce would have done the ordinance and the application for it simultaneously to get it up there.
Right.
Now, we
There's a
have had.
possibility that could happen.
All right.
Now, is
We
that
have
the
had
Mammoth
certain-
Arms? you're talking about?
Yes,
Mammoth Arms?
yes.
However, it's also the wards are involved to some degree, at least they're on the email strings. All right. And as I've told David, I don't have anything personal against the wards. And never had that there, but one of the things we have seen happen, if y'all will remember, after full-blown was concluded, a fellow from Fayetteville came out and wanted to use Math Fields for an indoor range. The indoor range was a completely different land use in my view. All right, and the building would have been refurbished out there to accommodate sound barriers and control and so forth. All right. Commissioners approved the text amendment, then turned around and denied his application.
And that was for indoor.
And that was for indoor. And now it's a plumbing company.
Go figure,
Pardon me?
go figure.
All right. Now, I will leave it to this as it develops, but probably a text amendment for shooting range or preserve, just in my view, probably needs to go up with an application for it. That way they've got the full picture when they come up, they see where it's proposed, what's proposed.
Right.
Just like y'all have been able to do, pulling up the Q Public map. And they can make assessments on it.
You know, we've got so much more to work with now with Q Public than when I first came on here. I mean, it's wonderful, really.
I would, Frank, I'm not, some of y'all may be members of the Griffin Gun Club. Now, the Griffin Gun Club predates the zoning ordinance.
Correct.
All right, and it is a non-conforming use in AR. And at various times, some of the people who are out there on Amelia, when the gun club wanted to expand, and the rule on non-conforming uses like that is probably you can expand to the boundaries where you're allowed now. All right. But some of the people who were more than happy to have the gun club come in and oppose North Talladega also were complaining about the gun club expansion down there. But that is a non-conforming use. Now, the reason I was getting to this, is that a preserve or is it a range?
I would say it's a range. I know they do target practice out there.
Multiple, weapon, I mean, that not limited to
Right.
shotgun
Pistols, rifles,
play or
shotguns.
anything.
Pistols and all that.
Just wanted to know how we fit the definition. Okay,
This is a great country or what?
I'm sorry?
So that is something to consider there for the public outdoor shooting range. There again, not in the code right now. If it stayed that way, you couldn't have the applications, so.
But then we're subject to getting kind of what we had with the campground, people trying to come in with their own guidelines and rules we gotta go back and work through, or we can just easily say, sorry, we can't do that because it's not in there.
Right.
I will tell you that on the campground, I personally, this is just a personal view, I think y'all would have been better served to just table or deny any text amendment that allowed it at all, as opposed to holding it till Bill could come back to look at another ordinance. Doing what I would have preferred, renders whatever Bill does moot.
We need all the help we can get.
All right, B and Bs.
Yeah, we got.
Airbnbs.
Yeah, so Airbnbs, strangely enough, are not mentioned in our code whatsoever.
And they, right, that has been partially by design, but we knew we'd have to do it at some
Right.
point.
Because they're out there regardless, and they can be a real problem if not managed properly. They turn into party houses and all sorts of stuff. So here is some standards, which I also used in Jonesburg. There's quite a few up there for the Airbnbs, making sure they're safe, and there's certain terms for lodging and things of that nature.
I
What's
have
the
a,
market in Jonesboro for them?
For what now?
Airbnbs, what's the market for them? Was there any particular thing that you heard when people were coming in to do the Airbnb?
Party rentals?
That, and I guess lack of quality hotels, so if you're in the area killing time for a few days.
Were they concentrated down toward Lake Spivey?
No, they were all over, and there was quite a few. What really got our attention was when the Super Bowl was in Atlanta. Oh my Lord, they were advertising out the wazoo.
I have a question. you can stay for 30 days in an Airbnb, only 14 in a bed and breakfast. Why is that?
It's, so,
Is that a national code or is that something we put in there?
that's standard usually. It's usually how they're defined most any place. Airbnb is more of a vacation kind of thing. This is more of a, don't have a hotel and I need to stay somewhere a while. More less of a tourist thing and more of a business thing, I guess, if you're.
Well, I wasn't looking for the explanation. I just saying that that's the way the code here was reading what I went through, and I was just asking if
That's the way I've seen them in most codes.
Okay, but I mean,
defined.
that's fine. I could care less about it. It's just that I thought there might be a mistake there as far as the length of time, why it would be different between the two.
And you do need to distinguish or else people will do it long term and.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about, I guess it's 33D? So, I have availed myself of Airbnbs in different locations on vacation with family and friends. And we cooked a lot of our meals because it saved us money from
You
going.
yourself did, not the host, right?
Okay, that's what's not into my pea brains. It doesn't read that says, what this reads is, there may be a kitchen, but you can't use it.
It says that in a bed and breakfast, I know for sure.
No, I think
Well, I will-
provided is the key word on that.
I will,
No prepared meals are provided.
I will clarify that and put no prepared meals provided for guests by owner or host. Cause that's the intent. Not that you can't do something, but
But the host couldn't send you La Paria over to that house.
man, you can do anything you want. I'm not gonna see it, but usually at bed and breakfast, you're expected to come down from sleeping and
Exactly, that's,
Owner
that,
provides
and
you a
this
meal.
is the same thing, is that
this
you're,
is kinda more you're on your own kinda thing.
okay,
You prepare your own stuff. They might have a snack box for you, but they're not gonna every
a fruit
morning
basket I've
make
had,
you breakfast
yeah,
and stuff like that.
gotcha.
Do y'all know whether we have any evidence that some of the motels in Griffin are used for extended stay, long-term leases?
Sure they are.
I think so, because a lot of the people that you
north
see that are being arrested are all in some place up on the North Expressway.
We had a great example of this in Jonesboro. Used to be an extended stay up there. Now it's pretty much a quasi apartment complex. It actually has a school bus stop there.
Is that the one on 1941?
Yes, up near North Avenue.
Yeah.
It has a school bus stop now because people use it as an apartment complex.
Did y'all have any regulations on those?
It had a lot of loopholes and there was nothing that says after the 30 days were up that the same person couldn't reapply for that same room. So you had people living there for a couple of years thanks to a loophole.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I was just gonna ask you about the extended stay, so I'm glad you mentioned that.
We will cover that in the commercial part in several months when we get to that. But
Okay.
yes, is a problem.
Also, David, you said that it have to be 25 years of age to enter into a contract for an Airbnb.
That's just standard language for these type of things. I've seen it elsewhere as well.
I got married when I was 21. You trying to tell me I couldn't go to a?
No,
I can drop it to 21.
parents to do it.
Well, I just, I think that's what we're supposed to do, is pick up on things that we question, correct?
Yep. Mhm.
And that's what I'm doing, is only questioning that. Is that?
Yep.
Tell you where this has gotten to be a really bad problem, though, is in Highlands, North Carolina. And they've had to pretty much shut down a lot of the stuff that was just wide open. And it basically was because you'd have weekend parties with no respect for the people that, live there full time on either side, and, got pretty.
Well, we had that problem on 92 off of, I believe, Patterson Road. There's a subdivision there with one house that was essentially rented, and event party, as an event party center.
Right.
Yeah, we've heard that one.
Had a swimming pool in the backyard.
Swimming pool, movie stars.
But with Airbnbs, they're normally going through something that's already designated on an app or something for Airbnb that have their own guidelines, usually, aren't they?
Yes.
So, I mean, could we not just rely on that for the age related stuff? Cause I know I've dealt with some of that before too, cause like,
Yeah.
you know, when my boys were going down to Frat Beach down at St. Simon's, you know, for the ball game, then there was times that myself or my brother-in-law had to go out and arrange a place. But then then later, there's other places that, you know, they could go and they could go right in at 22 and get a
That's
place.
fine.
You know,
What if you want to make the bail out?
Just try that off. It's not a real big deal.
Okay. All right. Good.
So the last thing in the, it seems like a minor thing, but it's actually a major thing. Conservation subdivision, which is making smaller lots and lots of green space, used to be a permitted use. And why I don't have a problem with a conservation subdivision, I put it down to the special exception category. So you guys can look at it and the standards and how the houses look and all that and have some more say-so in it than just being outright permitted. So,
I think it needs to be the way you've done it.
I think they're a great opportunity and serve a good purpose, but boy, we've had a lot of
Yeah.
ones we've worked through and it's taken a long time to get through them in the past, so I like it like that.
Well, okay, and I agree with y'all. I will tell you the reason they were put in as a permitted use was in order to encourage people to get out, to come in and preserve the green space. And one of the ironies was the, Wayne Moss and the health department, when we did it, did not understand the concept.
and I think putting it in this is not so much definitely to prevent that, is to make sure the houses look right, the streetscape is right, those kind of things, try to get some more control over that, so.
Again, I'm fine with it.
And an issue that I have had in the past, was defining green space. Just cause you left something undisturbed didn't necessarily
Right.
create a green space.
Do you have
Cause you might have weeds and briars,
is.
but that's not a green space, so defining that might be a challenge.
There's a definition of green space in the definition section that David gave you
Oh,
by
okay.
email, and you might want to
Missed
look
it.
at it and see if y'all view that as being sufficient.
Okay.
All right, if nothing jumps out at you in the accessory uses part, I was going to, skip down to the development standards, section 504. Unless y'all have any questions in the accessory part. So I want to go over a couple of things in the development standards.
So you have left I noted you had left everything in the medical hardship as is.
Yeah, I mean, those are pretty rare. So, one thing about the, development standards is a lot of these things were scattered all over the place. So I'm putting them in a one chart in this one section, so it's a one-stop shop to look at all the different standards, kind of put them together. I also did that for accessory structures. I got a primary structure chart and then an accessory structure chart. Again, putting everything in one piece like that. I'm going to make mention in the thing about architecture, about our future Appendix O, the architectural standards, which you guys will get in a few weeks to look at for the first time. And I'm gonna go ahead and refer to it in here so people know what to expect from that architectural standards guideline they're gonna have.
Now, you're doing development standards for AR1 or for AR2?
All of them. One thing to discuss in here for sure, and this is something I noticed this board has put off for a couple of years. I go ahead in if you look in the accessory structure chart down there, item Q, where it says frequency, I took y'all's proposed ordinance from a long time ago that you haven't really voted on yet officially, and went ahead and put it in here as a maximum of a certain amount of accessory buildings you can have on certain tracts of land. We had a scenario several months ago where a guy had like 2 acres or something, had like 8 accessory buildings on it. And I thought that was kind of crazy. So within reason, it restricts the amount of accessory buildings you can have on certain tracts less than 3 acres, for example, on there. So I didn't know if y'all wanted to go ahead and speed up those standards that you've been deliberating for a couple of years, because I went ahead and addressed it and put it in here.
That frequency or density?
Frequency. Also, and this is just a proposal, I did not put a thing on here. This can be a potential problem. I put on the accessory buildings number or letter S down there, maximum building size for accessory buildings. If you have a very small lot, half an acre or so, should you really be allowed to put an enormous 2,500 square foot pole barn on it with the house? Those kind of things. So I didn't know if y'all are comfortable with standards like that, where you have, again, have a smaller property, 0 to 2 acres, 2 to 3 acres. I have some thresholds there where you limit the size of accessory buildings that can be on a property, so they're not too big.
I think that's good, particularly for the neighbors on these small lots. There needs to be some sort of consistency. We got a situation out on Maple Drive where McElroy has built a house and jammed it almost right up on the curb because the back of the lot was not sufficient to support it. And they've brought in more dirt. I mean, they could have built over a dam with all the stuff they brought in. But to allow somebody to build, you know, that close to the street, and it's at least 30 feet closer to the street than every other house that sits in that road. So,
Right.
yeah, I'm glad you're addressing this.
Any more questions about any of that?
So you're gonna add the building size?
Yes, for
To
accessory
that.
buildings, yes. And there again, it would be reasonable. It won't be like super picky, but it'll be designed to carve out excess. Got an item U down there, open space and green space on the standards. We run into something recently where somebody, I don't know why they did it, as a subdivision with a designated open space, green space area. I don't know how it got to be the way it was, but nobody paid the taxes on it, and it went up for sale. And people were calling me right and left saying, I want to be able to build a house on this. I was like, you can't do that because it's designated green space. Well, why not? So I've made it clear in here that anything that's designated in the subdivision as a green space, open space, whatever you want to call it, cannot be built upon. It's that forever. So that kind of clarifies that.
It's good because if you don't deny it, people will do it.
Yes. Any more questions in that section?
No, I like that.
Going, yeah, I got one other one, on the maximum building height. Now, over in residential, we allow building heights, standard is 35, but you can increase them up to 60. But we're not allowing that in AR, any type.
Well,
There's
that's
a couple
it.
of pretty big houses out there.
In the principal, if you go up to the principal building section in the chart, it's still up there.
Okay.
The,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry, I see what you're doing now.
so I was not allowing that for the accessory buildings.
I apologize. I got you. Okay.
All right, so to save us some time here, when you get past AR1, with the exception of that agricultural tourism section, I'm talking about R1, R2, R2A, so on and so forth, they're pretty much all the same to a certain point. So the changes I made to one would probably look exactly alike on the other ones as well for R1, R2, all those. So I don't see the point of going through each of those sections individually, because they're all pretty much the same except for the house size difference. It's pretty much the way they are different from each other. So that could save some time for discussion on that.
And you don't have an agricultural issue in AR2 because it's never been allowed.
Right, it's very restricted. It's not as much as AR1. I will say regarding, and I think we talked about this before, R4 and R5 single-family detached districts are about 1% each of the total parcels in the county. That's a very small amount. They're the house sizes are very small on those. I think we have too many residential districts that kind of sort of are redundant. So I was proposing on R4 and R5 to, I guess abolish is the right word, to make it to where the lots we have that are zoned that now would stay and they could be built upon, but you could not rezone to those residential districts any further in the future. So they would, what you have now is what you have, and no expansion of R4 and R5 in the county. The standards would stay on the books for the vacant lots that are zoned that, but you could not be allowed to rezone to that anymore in the future.
And you're avoiding the word grandfather so that you're not allowing expansion of them,
Yes,
as that use continue,
yes.
with expansions.
Well, let's hold on to that. If you've got a property that's zoned R4 and the text remains in the code, it is, and the text has to remain in the code if it's gonna still be zoned R4.
Right.
All right, Ms. Upshur, you could still have, that's still a non-conforming use. I'm sorry, let me back up. It's a permitted use that has been approved. So if you had a house there, and let's say it was the minimum, but it's zoned R4, you can expand that house as a matter of right.
Right. But you couldn't tear it down and build something that's still allowed within there.
No, you could.
Yeah.
You could.
You could. It's still zoned R4. The restriction is, that David's proposed is to say, after the date of enactment of this ordinance, no other property will be considered for
Or zoning
zoning
in
to
that,
R4.
in that category. But those that are there remain
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
without restriction of any further.
right,
That's understood, that.
yes. I will word that accordingly, yes.
David, I did want to ask a question about the R2A and
Yes.
R2. Let's walk through that with them.
So I assume what you're talking about, there is
Duplexes.
long time ago, duplexes were gonna be not allowed in R2, so they made a special R2A for duplexes. However, I noticed there is an error in the code where duplexes were still allowed in R2. So we are fixing that error, taking them out of R2 and keeping in R2A.
We have operated on the assumption that no duplexes were permitted in R2, and then only to find, lo and behold, there was a permitted use that still had it in there.
Yep.
And that has been deleted.
Yes.
Okay.
That was an important catch there. So if you go to R2, section 803, the two-family dwelling, i.e. duplex, is now struck out of R2 and is in R2A where it belongs. One thing to note too, back on poultry livestock for a minute, there were some provisions in R2 and R1 for a certain amount of chickens, a certain amount of horses, things like that. I don't have a problem with that, keeping that in there. So it's a little bit of agriculture in these other districts, but most of it's in AR1. Any other questions or anything? Comments?
Are we gonna look at a couple of these? I mean, or not? Or is the Rs we're gonna hold off?
Well, like I said, they're basically, what you see on the changes of R1 is gonna apply to R2. The only real difference between any of those is the house size, basically.
Okay.
So it's
Well,
kinda cookie cutter, the changes.
Well, I understand, but when I went through initially and marked up all those I looked at, there were discrepancies with numbers and
Oh,
all
okay.
that stuff and this, that, and the other, so.
Yeah.
I guess I'll have to go through and see if some of that's been addressed.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then, like I say, R3 was just, didn't even look like it belonged to our
R3 is weird.
code.
Yeah, it's definitely,
But with the new revision, we're gonna try to make R3 look kinda similar to everything else.
well, R3 is the existing manufactured home parks and multifamily, so
Yeah.
it's definitely different than the R1s
Right.
and R2s and all.
Understand that, but it could still be, and it maybe it is now, it could be kind of
Yes. there's
laid out the same way.
Definitely some stuff that can be improved there, and
Okay.
yes, laid out, organized the same way. Let's see here. Let me go to that section. R3.
Hey, this has been a mammoth undertaking, you really ought to be applauded.
Thank you. Yeah, R3, Article 9, multifamily. Some things, and they were clarified for sure. It has, yeah. It has a lot less permitted uses than some of the other ones do.
So again, so on that one, all right, so 9034, we're not gonna allow anything, I mean, basically, we're taking out all stick-built guidelines there in that part. We're just gonna refer to that back in the, it's just in some and not in some, is one thing, that's what I had a question.
Yeah, it's basically talking about a detached dwelling there, so I was proposing to, if you're gonna do R3, just do R3 all the way and not have the detached dwellings in there. Just focus
Okay.
on the apartments and all that.
All right, and then, for example, in, I made note of, I mean, that B1E, you've got those except for JMTX, well, that does not correspond with the latest and
Yeah.
greatest at all.
Yeah, you're right. Good catch.
Then, like in number 2, under church synagogues, and under A, in some of the, like, zoning, we have this similar wording, but some of it, that says collector or above road.
Yeah,
But others say collector or greater road.
right.
Um,
I think that you're looking at something I may have been doing at 10 o'clock at night. So, yeah, I will make all the language the same.
I mean, I had a lot of notes on them, on that one when I
Right,
went through
right, right.
before. And like I say, I sent them to you, but it looks like they're still in here, some of this stuff.
Yeah, I have not changed this one from the original, so your comments are not yet reflected in this one.
Okay.
I changed some stuff on AR1 because that was such a hot button issue. But these have not changed since the original.
Okay, well,
But you're right, I realize that some of that language is not the same, and it needs to be exactly the same, so.
yeah, that's why if we just keep it consistent, you know, I think that will be good. And then if you go back under 905, under the development standards, I mean, again, here you've got like F, it says minimum side yard, but then under the writing, it says 20 foot from front property line. And then under minimum rear yard, it says 30 foot from front property line. And
I
then
wear contacts, my contacts were probably getting blurry, I was probably on about 5 Coke
Okay.
Zeros by that point, so yes.
all right, and then there's references to AR1 structures where it should say R3 and R2A for R3. Just things
Okay.
like that that just drive me
I
nutty
will-
when I'm going through making a bunch of comments.
I will go through that one when I'm fresh one day and with a fine tooth comb and get those.
Like I say, I made you a lot of good comments before.
You did?
Just want to be sure they're addressed. Something we're proud of.
Yep, I will indeed get those.
All right.
So that's all I had. Y'all got any further comments? Like I said, this one, Articles 5 through 11 will not be coming to y'all on the 27th, just the ones we talked about last week.
Okay.
So that, a little bit less pressure.
All right. That sounds good.
Anybody have anything else?
I do.
Okay.
I ran this by, Mr. Galloway earlier, and, I've come back with, an amendment.
Okay.
This is a public notice.
Oh, yeah.
Says the Spalding County Planning Commission plans to have an environmental workshop on such and such a day. Yes, we're gonna go fishing. The public is invited, but please plan to bring your own tackle, your own bait, and plan to clean your own fish. And no, we are not going to talk about zoning, because who the hell wants to do that while you're fishing? Now, I'm serious about this. We have a good group here, and I'd like for us to be able occasionally to have just some R&R. I'm not asking y'all to vote on that tonight. I'll submit it to, the Community Development Director, and we'll.
So would that be a public fishing preserve?
Sir?
Would that be a public fishing preserve?
Yeah,
Sounds like a good place to do it.
That's a
It's-
preserve.
as long as they bring their own tackle and their own bait and clean their own damn fish.
Okay.
Frank, you can have a meeting of 3 of you to do whatever you want to do, provided A, it is noticed, and B, you take no business decision. You make no business decision. Okay? And when I say notice, that would mean do a notice and an agenda for publication and requirement of open meeting.
You can do that.
So
Big
if you
things.
wanted to say, the planning commission has a special called meeting to meet at High Falls to eat catfish, you can do that. put the notice on the board and tell folks you're gonna go eat catfish, either at your expense or the county's, whichever you decide, and you can get Dr. Steve to pay for. Alright? And put on there, no business decisions will be made or considered.
Only whether or not you're gonna keep a fish or throw it back.
Pardon?
It's whether you're gonna keep the fish or throw it back.
Oh,
Does that mean you can't talk about an issue too?
Yeah.
you
You
can't
said no
vote.
decision.
You cannot vote.
No monkey business.
Yeah, cause I mean, you all three could wind up at the same restaurant one night.
Right.
And you go, how about that dumb case we heard, but you're not conducting business?
You know, I just think that as much time as we put in trying to have things that the rest of the county is gonna live with forever, that we at least ought to be able to meet casually. I mean, I like all these folks on here. And I don't like to feel like the only time I can speak to them is when we got zoning to talk about, you know. Thank you, Mr. Galloway. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
We'll make a motion. to
May I
adjourn.
have a motion to adjourn?
So
I'll
moved,
move.
ma'am.
I have a motion and a second. Do I have a vote? All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, none opposed. We are adjourned.
Thank you very much.
unanimously.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank
You
you
know
for,
that UGA's Center for Urban Agriculture is headquartered here in Griffin?
yeah,
Extension Center.
You don't have to vote.
thank you for indulging.
Need all this stuff.
I think you just leave.
That's what I thought.